The heavy oaken doors of St. Jude's groaned like a dying man as they closed behind Eleanor, shutting out the dying light of a blood-orange sunset. Inside, the silence was a physical weight, thick with the scent of old incense, melting wax, and something else, something ancient and cloying like dust from a forgotten tomb. The air hung still and cold, a stark contrast to the humid summer evening she had just left behind. Her footsteps, soft as they were on the worn stone aisle, echoed unnaturally in the cavernous nave, each one a small betrayal of her presence. The magnificent stained glass windows, which by day painted the sanctuary in jewel-toned light, were now dark, monstrous eyes staring into the encroaching darkness, their saints and angels rendered as grotesque, shadowy figures. Flickering votive candles cast long, dancing shadows that writhed and twisted like tormented spirits along the walls, making the familiar statues of apostles seem to lean in, whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear. Eleanor was not a regular churchgoer. Years had passed since she last sought solace within these hallowed walls, but the weight on her soul had become an unbearable burden, a physical ache in her chest that stole her breath and haunted her waking hours. The sin she carried was a dark, venomous thing coiling in the pit of her stomach, its poison seeping into every corner of her life. She needed absolution. She needed to voice the unspeakable, to cast it out into the consecrated silence of the confessional, and hope that God as grace was vast enough to wash her clean. She clutched the small, tarnished silver cross that hung around her neck, its metal cold against her clammy skin. It offered no comfort. The silence in the church was not peaceful. It was predatory. It felt as if the very stones were holding their breath, waiting. She saw a single light burning in the back, illuminating the dark wood of the confessional booth, a sign of hope. Father Michael was still there. He was an old priest, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by decades of listening to the quiet desperation of his flock. His voice was usually a low, gentle rumble, a sound that had brought comfort to generations. Eleanor took a deep, shuddering breath and walked toward the booth, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The short walk felt like a pilgrimage across a desolate wasteland. Each step was heavier than the last, as if she were wading through a current of unseen resistance. The air grew colder, and the scent of decay intensified, now mingled with the faint metallic tang of ozone, like the air after a lightning strike. She slipped into the penitent's side of the booth, the cramped space smelling of polished wood and fear. She knelt on the worn velvet kneeler, her knees trembling. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating blanket that pressed in on her. She could hear her own ragged breathing, loud and intrusive, in the profound quiet. She waited. The small sliding panel that separated her from the priest remained shut. Seconds stretched into minutes, each one a small eternity. The silence from the other side was unnerving. It wasn't the patient, meditative silence of a listening priest. It was a void, an empty, watchful, and deeply malevolent stillness. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," she began, her voice a reedy whisper that cracked with unshed tears. It has been 10 years since my last confession." Her voice faltered, the words catching in her throat. The weight of a decade of secrets pressed down on her, threatening to crush her before she could even begin. She forced herself to continue, the confession tumbling out in a torrent of shame and regret, a litany of small cruelties, and one great, terrible transgression that had defined her life. She spoke of lies and betrayals, of a moment of weakness that had shattered another's life, leaving irreparable damage in its wake. As she spoke, the words seemed to hang in the air, congealing into something foul and tangible. She wept silently, tears tracing cold paths down her cheeks, dripping onto her clasped hands. When she finally finished, her voice raw and her soul laid bare, a profound and unnerving silence descended once more. She waited for the familiar, gentle words of counsel, for the penance that would be her path back to grace. But they never came. The silence stretched, taut and menacing, vibrating with an energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. The air in the booth grew impossibly cold, a biting, unnatural chill that sank into her bones. Then a sound, a low, guttural chuckle that seemed to come not from the priest's side of the confessional, but from the very air around her. It was a wet, rasping sound filled with ancient malice and mocking amusement. It was nothing like Father Michael's gentle voice. Goosebumps erupted across Eleanor's skin. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her haze of sorrow. "Father," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Father Michael, are you there?" The sliding panel between them scraped open with a screech of wood against wood that set her teeth on edge. In the dim, ambient light filtering from the church, she saw not the kind, wrinkled face of the old priest, but a shadowy silhouette. And within that silhouette, 2 points of light glowed with a sickening, phosphorescent intensity. They were not eyes. They were embers, burning with a cold, infernal fire that promised nothing but eternal suffering. A voice, layered and discordant, slithered out of the darkness. It was a chorus of agony and damnation, the sound of grinding bone and tearing flesh, yet it formed words, shaping them with a chilling, articulate precision. "Eleanor," the voice rasped, a sound that scraped against her soul, "your sins are delicious." It savored her name, drawing it out, twisting it into something obscene. "You come seeking forgiveness from a God who has long abandoned this place, but you have not found a priest. You have found something older." Panic seized her. This was not Father Michael. The being on the other side of the screen radiated an aura of pure, unadulterated evil that was suffocating. She tried to stand, to flee, but her limbs were frozen, locked in place by a terror so absolute it had become a physical paralysis. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, useless drumbeat against the encroaching doom. The voice continued, its tone shifting to one of cruel intimacy, as if sharing a delightful secret. "That great, terrible transgression, the one you hide from all but your God, I saw it. I was there, a whisper in the shadows, urging you on. You think it was your weakness? It was my strength." The silhouette leaned closer, and the fetid stench of the grave washed over her, thick and nauseating. She could now make out more of the face, a horrifying distortion of Father Michael's features. His skin was stretched taut over his skull, gray and translucent. His jaw was unhinged, hanging impossibly wide, and his lips were pulled back in a silent scream that revealed gums as black as tar. But the eyes were where the true horror lay. They burned with a hateful glee, twin vortexes of madness and despair that promised to swallow her whole. "Confession is an invitation, Eleanor," the demonic voice hissed, the sound of 1,000 suffering souls crying out in unison. "You opened your soul, and I accepted." The wooden screen between them began to splinter, cracking and groaning as an unseen pressure was applied from the other side. A single grotesquely elongated finger, tipped with a shard of jagged yellowed nail, poked through the lattice, writhing like a pale worm. There is no absolution here. There's only consumption. Eleanor finally found her voice, but all that escaped her lips was a choked, desperate scream, a sound swallowed by the oppressive, unholy silence of the church. The screen shattered, exploding inward in a shower of wooden splinters. A hand, skeletal and impossibly strong, shot through the opening and clamped around her throat. Its grip was like iron, cold and unyielding. The last thing Eleanor saw was not the face of a priest, but a gaping maw of endless night, framed by the burning embers of its eyes, drawing closer. The last thing she felt was not the peace of forgiveness, but the searing, icy touch of damnation as it dragged her from the world of the living. Outside, the last sliver of the sun vanished below the horizon, plunging the world into darkness. The doors of St. Jude's remained shut, guarding the terrible secret within. And from the high bell tower, a single mournful toll rang out, not from a rope pulled by human hands, but from the very stones themselves, weeping for the soul that had just been lost. Inside the confessional there was only silence more, a sated, patient, and eternal silence, waiting for the next sinner to come seeking a forgiveness it had no intention of ever granting.